Welcome to another episode of the Men in Conversation series, a podcast series in collaboration with the Khaleesi Foundation and Justice Desk Africa.
I just saw my psychiatrist yesterday. So I was on a maintenance dose of antidepressants, which is up now. And I was so shocked at how expensive it was. And my first thought went to, I'm like, how are most kids, how? It's like, it's impossible.
Yeah.
They cannot access. And I'm kind of stuck there. And probably are so many kids living on the Cape Plus and in townships that don't even know that they're sick. You know, that it's not them, it's not their fault. They don't know that, so they won't even know to seek medical help.
Sure, that is so powerful, and thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah,
and I hope that through this conversation that more people feel affirmed, they feel seen, and that the stigma slowly but surely dissolves away. Thank you so much again for joining us at another episode of the Men in Conversation podcast. I'm your host, Edward Keenan Jacobs, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Craig Dylan Lucas.
I must expose myself.
I'm sorry.
Something looks different about you.
Oh
is it your socks?
I think it's my socks. So I got a haircut. As you can see, I'm back in my schoolboy era. And
that's good.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for joining. Today, Craig is, as you all know, is a singer-songwriter, global performer, but all in essence, a beautiful soul, a wonderful person. And I know that by the end of this conversation, you're going to be as in love with him as I am. So thank you so much for joining. Today, we're going to chat about mental health, about the importance of mental health, especially in men, and how we as men can reconnect with ourselves. And we'll chat about some of the societal constraints that often stop us from reconnecting with ourselves and what we can do in order to prioritize our mental health and ensure that we take care of ourselves. So thank you so much for joining, and thank you for joining us.
No, dude, it's a pleasure. When you called, I was like, for sure.
Fantastic. And I think a great place to start for me, as I was sort of researching for this episode, happened upon some harrowing statistics as it relates to mental health. And the two that stood out for me, one was that out of the sort of more than 13,000 deaths by suicide in 2019, more than 10,000 of that 13,000 were men, which is wild to me, right? And then sort of related to that statistic is that women are diagnosed with depression at higher rates than men, but men are 4 times more likely to die of suicide than women. And those statistics are obviously harrowing. But for me, I'm trying to sort of make sense of that. So like on the one hand, women are diagnosed with depression at a higher rate, but men are the ones dying at a higher rate. For you, sort of like, how do we begin to even make sense of statistics like that?
Men don't speak about it because they feel like they're not supposed to. I think because of the expectation of men, fathers, husbands to also be providers. When you do struggle with depression, it's hard to do that a lot of the time. So I think there's also shame, I'm not being a good man for my family. I struggle with that. Like I think of having kids, and I think, is it selfish of me to want to have kids knowing I'm going to go through episodes for maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks where I cannot be there for my kids emotionally, physically. I might be horrible with them, and that bothers me even. So I also think that's a problem, a lot of shame, which leads to suicide, which leads to self-harm, which might lead to substance abuse, which only makes things so much worse.
Literally.
So much worse.
So much worse.
So much worse.
I think the funny thing is, we all think that that's the normal way to be a man, but it's also an impossible thing to be.
Yes, absolutely.
How can you be strong? You are unemotional. You're the breadwinner. You are all of these things. And for me, what I saw as often a core of my sort of mental health journey was that a lot of these tenets, these characteristics of masculinity is unattainable. And when I can't attain that, that's when I start spiraling. So like a lot of like men who cannot, as you said, be the breadwinner, they see that as an inherent comment on themselves.
Because they're failing at something that's supposed to be natural to them, because that's what you're made to believe, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's so ironic. And maybe it's because I'm very emotional, but I feel like it takes so much more strength to be emotional than to not. Like, when you're not, not speaking about it, not letting out, all you're doing is hiding away. You're packing it away. Like, what strength is there in not dealing with your emotions? Like, I feel like strength is facing it head on. It's hard. It's not easy. Like, it's not easy to cry. It's not fun to cry. It's hard to accept and do that. So, I think it's very ironic that the definition of strength is not dealing with your issues. It's quite wild,
I think the strength, as you said, the strength in confronting your problems head on and being honest with them and doing that self-work, that is the epitome of strength. And more of that, more of that.
And it's hard, dude. Like, it's so deeply rooted because it's systematized. I think if you're brought up in that sort of system, that type of dad, that type of mom, your whole life, and as an adult, you don't even know that this is something that was conditioned. You don't know that, which it was. This is how they molded you, and unless this light bulb goes on, you hear something, you see a talk, whatever.
You listen to the podcast.
You listen to the podcast. Yeah, for sure. Podcasts like these, I think, then you realize, like, oh, this also isn't the only way to be. This is what I was told, it's what I was taught. And then the hard work starts. Unconditioning, deconditioning yourself. It's hard. It's hard, dude.
It's so difficult. And I was having a conversation with my father the other day, and we were talking about like finances and things like that. And he was telling me that he was raised to protect his wife from finances. So he would take everything on himself. So whether, there's some issues, whatever, running out of money, he would not communicate that to his wife, to my mom, simply because he was raised that you as a man, you deal with that. You bottle it up, you protect your family. And I was just looking at him, not even as a father, just as a human being, and saying like, dude, that must be such a lot to handle on your own. And how many men think that they have to deal and they have to move forward alone in isolation, not sharing with the closest people to them. I can only imagine what that must be like, how that must be for a lot of men out there. Do you have any thoughts on that, and sort of like that feeling of men having to deal with stuff alone?
Just again, that I think it's ironic, like, financially, your job is to protect your family. Protect them by letting them know, like, things aren't great. We've got to make some sacrifices. We've got to, and I'm so sure wives, husbands, kids, they'd want to help. They'd feel better helping. It would be so much better for the entire family. Everyone's on board. But it's indoctrination. Like, people don't know any better. I think that's what it is.
Definitely. And I think COVID-19, I think, it played a big role in that, because a lot of people got laid off. A lot of people cannot now work as much, and now cannot provide for their families. And if that provision, that breadwinner role, is such a key part of your identity, and now COVID-19, which no one could control, took that away, that sort of spiraling started to happen. And when we look at sort of coping mechanisms, ways in which we cope and we try and handle a lot of the stress, we often turn to unhealthy ways, right? So that's substances, it's alcohol, it's risky sexual behavior. There are many ways, right, that we can often deal with these things and these unhealthy coping mechanisms. I'm curious to hear sort of your thoughts on that issue, because I know it's something that plagues a lot of people, including myself. I
mean, man, I tick off every box of just like every unhealthy coping mechanism. Every unhealthy coping mechanism you just mentioned. And for me, I realize also that a lot of it is, it's self-deprecating, it's punishment, like it's destructive, because I feel like I'm not good enough, therefore I deserve these bad things. That was a big thing for me personally. I don't know if that's other people's experience, because that's the feeling that would follow the risky sexual behavior, the drinking. I literally feel like I want to F myself up today. It's like, that's the feeling, you know? And it's punishment because you're not living up to all of these expectations. You feel that's what I deserve. I don't deserve anything better than this. I don't deserve health. I don't deserve happiness. So that was quite a big realization for me and a breakthrough, and it's why I was able to stop. I'm almost 18 months sober, clean of everything.
Wow.
But
I'm so happy for you.
Thank you, dude. It's been incredible. So the realization was accepting, like, I actually do deserve to be healthy. Like, I deserve to be happy. I don't deserve to punish myself, you know. And there are times I go through the motions, I think about it, I feel it, and I got to remind myself, like, I'm doing good.
That is so powerful, and I think that thing you said there about that we deserve happiness, we deserve to feel joy, we deserve to feel okay with ourselves, and that again for me is probably the bravest thing you can do is to actually, you know, see that you are deserving of all those good things.
Sure.
And I sort of, on my journey with mental health and trying to get to a place where you are more healthy, you're more accepting, and sort of transitioning from some of the more negative coping mechanisms to positive coping mechanisms. I was watching this thing on Netflix. I can't even remember the name, but they were talking about meditation and stuff. And they were saying that you should see experiences and thoughts like cars on a highway. Right? And that often the voice in your head is not you. You are just the one hearing those words. And for me, my journey was not identifying with the thoughts I have.
Yeah.
And that's so difficult because you think the thought's coming from my head, so it must be me.
Yeah.
But that you often aren't in control of that. These are just cars on the highway, right? And you know, you need to see them as cars on the highway and not try and stop traffic and be like, don't go car, but seeing the car, letting it go and letting the next one come, because we don't have to identify with those thoughts. Those are thoughts. Yeah. We are just observants of them. For sure. And we have a choice whether or not to identify with them. Yeah. Have you sort of conceptualized of it in that way? Because for me, that was quite a new thing, because I thought thoughts equal Ed, right? I don't know, was that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For sure. That's something big to me. Something I do, and I read it somewhere, is I literally tell myself, every time an intrusive thought comes in, every time, you know, like I'm arguing with someone in my head, or I just say, I think this is not true. That's all I do. It's like, this is not true. At one point, I visualized it like a balloon, and I would pop the balloon in my head every single time.
Wow.
So I think it's absolutely true. What makes it hard with depression, for instance, right? There's this thing that happens also where you just want to cut yourself off. And that's the hardest thing, because then the voice, it gains control, and again, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And there are times I've been at home, there are times I left my house, I'm going to a friend, I need to talk to someone, and I just circle the block, drive past them, and you're just like unable to. And the second you speak to someone, little crack in the door, you know, and things start getting better. So the voice in your head, it's a parasite. A song I wrote, it's one of the newer songs that hasn't been out yet. There's a line in there, and I wrote, it's because it's the same with feelings. I'm like, it's what you feel, it isn't who you are. And that was that changed things for me significantly. Just to separate yourself, because it isn't. Again, it's your feelings. Like, you are you're not the feelings. You know?
That is just powerful, and I'll carry that with me, and I'm sure listeners and people watching this will carry that we are not our feelings, and feelings will come and go.
Which they do. They do.
I think it's often difficult to feel like that, you know, because when you're in the depths, you know, when you're in that valley, you often, one, you feel alone, and two, feels like it's gonna be forever. Like, I am now fundamentally broken. Like,
it is. It is. Time stops.
And the amount of times I'm just like, this is just how I am. I guess God made a mistake of it's like, and And I think what we're trying to do with this podcast, and I know what you are trying to do, is to tell people that you're not alone.
Yeah.
Like, we all go through these things. We all experience the weather. And it's about one, realizing that you are not alone, and two, sharing it with those you trust. Yeah. And as we sort of move towards helping people listening to this and watching this with some practical advice, tools, things that they can apply. We've spoken about not identifying with the feelings, but also feeling the feelings, but not identifying with them. And two, communicating with others and as much as you can. Do you have any other sort of tips, things you've done, things that have helped you through your journey?
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to talk to people. I've written letters to friends.
Wow.
When I can't, I've written letters to myself.
Yeah.
Just writing it down. It goes from being in your head to being there. You see it, it's separate again. Maybe that's a good place to start journaling. I mean, you hear it all the time. It helps, dude. It helps. And I often go back and read. Like, it's a book I'll read from start to where I am now, you know. And I was like, man, I overcame that. And I laugh because I'm like, I was so dramatic on this because it felt like the world was ending.
Yeah. But I think another sort of overarching journey that I've been on is to just be myself, you know. Because I growing up conflated who I am, and I'm sure you probably experience this as well, that you are your success, right? You are the academic, you are this person, you are this facilitator, but you are you first and foremost, besides the stuff that you're good at.
Yeah.
And because when you're not singing as great, or you're not, facilitating as great, or whatever, then your world comes crashing down. And that's where I've often been. And I'm on that journey of, you are who you are, first and foremost. Be yourself, and then the rest will come. Yeah. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, you mentioned identity earlier, and I think that's the core of the problem is people are brought up to be in this box. I think there's so much fear about what happens when I get out of that box because I don't know who I am without the box.
Yes.
It's so scary. Like, imagine as an adult, you disassociate. You're like, I don't like any of these things. This is not who I am. And then you're stuck with, oh God, so who am I? Because you identify with this stuff.
For so long.
So long, So, I mean, where I am now, I struggle with that, right? Because I'm a singer.
Yeah.
I was at school now, went back to study. And especially with the singing, I was like, I'm not as successful as I need to be. And I took it so hard. And I thought about it. I asked myself, there's a thing my psychologist does, it's called the 5 whys. And you just got to you ask your question, you ask yourself why, and there's a why on the why, and you get to the core of it. And I was like, why do I want to be successful? I want to travel all over the world. I want to make a lot of money. It's like, why do I want to do that? And at the end of it, it's like, I don't even think I want that. Like, I would I hate airplanes. It's like, I would hate flying to different places all the time. I'm so needy. I need my family. I need my friends. I'd hate being away from them. I'd hate the level of success where I couldn't go anywhere and people would stop me. I was like, I don't like these things. You're told that this is success and you must want this. I was like, maybe I just want to do small shows for the rest of my life. Maybe I want to be an academic, which is sort of where I'm at now, is maybe I'll be an academic and then make music.
Yeah, that is beautiful, and I think it's a great place to sort of end this conversation. Thank you so much, Craig.
Thank you
for your time, for your openness, for sharing. I always enjoy having conversations with you, and I'm sure people listening to this and watching this have also, felt the openness and felt the authenticity and felt the love. So thank you so much.
Man. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening and tuning into another episode of the Men in Conversation podcast. I've been Edward. This is Craig. Thank you so much. Please, my one challenge, as usual, is to share this episode with one other person. Just one. I'm sure you can do that. Thank you for watching. Please like, please share, please subscribe. I will check you on the next one. Thanks so much.